Today on View from the Summit, we're joined by Nadia Costa, a land use attorney who spent years co-chairing the land use department at Miller Starr, one of California's most respected real estate law firms. We had a wide-ranging conversation about finding your way after a rocky start in high school, building niche legal practice, the mentors who helped shape her career, and what it means to fight for a client. Nadia's path to law has been anything but conventional, and I hope you all enjoyed our conversation as much as I did.
Yeah, let's start off. Nadia, what's your connection to Sugar
So, nice to see you.
It's great to see.
Let's see, connection to Sugar Bowl. I have been around Sugar Bowl for quite some time. My biological son started there in winter term years ago, and he was a racer beforehand. We decided to jump in feet first, and he began academy when he was a freshman, and we sold our home in the Bay Area and decided to become fully committed to the Truckee community and to Sugar Bowl. And it has been one of the most important decisions that we've made on behalf of our family. And I feel that way about Sugar Bowl, continuing to this day.
It was a great community. A lot of people are doing it. So
I think Sugar Bowl is a really important ability to keep people together, not just when you're seeing one another every day, but even beyond that, the bonds that it encourages and the nature of the community it serves has been really meaningful. We don't even have kids going to the academy anymore, and yet we still like to be involved. It shows how important the entity is and what a gift it has been to our family.
yeah, a lot of people feel that way about the community. It's truly special. So in high school, as a junior, what did you want to be? Did you know about land use? Did you know where you wanted to go?
No. So I may be a bit different than others because I almost didn't make it out of high school.
Jason, who interviewed yesterday, felt the same way. He had a lot of fun in high school, and then he realized as it was going down to college, he needed to start thinking forward.
I do think it'll relate to young people need to be worried about and focused on. But I had a challenging background and did not attend school at all. And so I was able to only get to my graduation. My high school was pretty challenging. My mom didn't send out our graduation announcements because my mom did not think that I was going to graduate, but I had a wonderful guidance counselor who advocated for me and got my last 2 Fs to D minuses. And that is how I graduated high school. And then once that occurred, I was only 17. So I had never taken any sort of SAT. I had no sense of going to any college and didn't really have any clear direction at all. But I also did not want to be sleeping on my mother's couch the rest of my life. And so I decided to go to a junior college. Once I was in a place where I could choose what I wanted to study, and it was up to me whether or not I was going to be successful, because I had always loved school. I didn't have a lot of friends growing up, so books were my friend. So I loved reading, but there were a mandatory list. I refused to read all of those, but I would read 12 other books that week. So as soon as I got to junior college, I wanted to study psychology. Was always very interested in working with families that were dealing with violence. And I also at that time, because I was contributing to my own education, I was working in a crisis nursery where we would basically take in kids from 0 to 5 who are at risk of being abused. So their parents could basically just drop them off and leave and come back when they were ready. I helped care for kids there while I was in junior college. I was able to have strong enough grades so I could transfer to Santa Barbara. And I ultimately decided to do sociology versus psychology because I was more interested in understanding how people interact with each other versus the therapeutic role, which was not my gig.
What did you feel like you learned from the crisis clinic? That's an interesting place to learn.
It cemented my desire to work in the Frontline role as a social worker versus a therapist in an office. I appreciated families who were working as hard as they could to protect their families, getting to see them outside of a system and them reaching out for help and being able to provide a little bit of support. I appreciated getting to bear witness to people's resiliency. Social work has ties to land use, which were unexpected, which I can share with you at the appropriate time. It did factor into what I've always liked to do.
Going into Santa Barbara, you studied sociology to your desire to be a social worker.
Yes.
What were your next steps after that?
After I graduated from college, I moved to San Diego, and then I needed to work a bunch and try to find my way. I was in a difficult relationship and trying to move away from that. Needing to get away from that was helpful because I was trying to get far away. And so I was able to apply for and was granted a full scholarship to University of Chicago for their Master's in Social Welfare program. Chicago was sort of the birthplace of social work, and UC was the number one program. They funded me. I ultimately decided for a variety of reasons that I should transfer and come back to California. And all of my professors facilitated that transfer. I'm so indebted to everybody in Chicago. So I came back and went to UCLA, where I got my social welfare degree. While I was there, I worked in residential drug treatment with maternal substance abusers who had minimum 10-year crack cocaine histories. That was an additional layer of my experience. And that, again, was interesting for me because I'm white, grad school, going into South Central LA. And in a lot of residential treatment, most staff have their own recovery history. And I haven't used crack. And so that was not my drug of choice. And so trying to figure out how I could be useful there was a real interesting process to figure out how, as a social worker, when you come from differing backgrounds, how do you authentically relate to other people and not be irritating, not be annoying, but still be frank and useful? So there were many skills.
Yeah. Then going to UCLA, I'm sure you had experiences working with others.
Yeah.
Do you think any of them have stuck with you? Do you think the lessons put in there do you even now?
Because after I left UCLA, I became an emergency response worker for Children's Protective Services. My job to go out, all of the women I worked with in treatment, their children had been removed related to abuse and neglect. Once I moved into the role of doing the initial investigation crisis intervention, seeing those women in a pretty intimate state and circumstance gave me a ton of compassion, and you saw them differently than what can happen for social workers, where you don't necessarily have a ton of patience. Because if you see a mom who's been using, and that has been, child's been sold on the street, a child who's been burned, you can viscerally get so angry at the mom. But then it doesn't mean that she doesn't have responsibility, but you can hold some compassion. And the other thing that was super helpful for me is recovery is very difficult and not that many people are successful. But when they are, even if it's not perfect, their entire lives are different. And so I actually always had a lot of hope if somebody was given the right type of treatment and support, that there was an opportunity for their kids to be raised, if not with them full time, still in their family and close by. And
Be at risk.
yes, and not being trapped in a foster care system forever.
After that, was that when you started working with the lady who was imprisoned? After crime, or was there steps in between?
There were steps in between. So I worked as an emergency response worker. Like if I went back to the county today, that was the job that I wanted to do. I never wanted to be in management. It is a challenging job in terms of it's hard to do it well for a long period of time because you see so much that sometimes you can be become either super jaded and you're like,
Start walling stuff.
start pulling kids too quickly. So I didn't want to do that. I thought that'd be a disservice. There was always a fair amount of risk. We would be given these loose sheets of paper. Somebody would call into the hotline and say, I think so-and-so has been abused. Here's the allegation. In terms of the level of risk, they would say, go out within the next 10 days, or if the child was an imminent risk of harm, go out within 2 hours. And they write a big I and hand you a piece of paper and say, go off. And you went off by yourself and did the initial investigation. There was always a fair amount of risk, but there were, I actually had to share with my family because they were potentially at risk too. That's when my husband and second dad were like, you talked about law school. Do you want to go? I was afraid that if I didn't start law school relatively soon, it would be more difficult as time goes on. And I thought I was going to be a child advocate, which doesn't really exist as a job for the most part. I didn't find that out until I was in law school. I ultimately went to law school at Boalt with UC Berkeley.
What did you study in law school? Did you know coming out of law school what you wanted to do? If something land use the way there.
In law school, at least where I went, law school isn't so much about focusing heavily to develop a lot of substantive knowledge in a particular area. Like that's what you get when you start working. It is really to help you just kind of think like a lawyer. I took a whole variety of classes. I've liked property, but I never focused in that area. I loved constitutional law. I did a bunch of clinics. So I just kind of explored in anything that was interesting to me. And then I was really lucky because back then I happened to do well at the beginning. And so I knew I was going to have to work over the summers. So I thought I'd just go back to the county. A few big law firms would take first-year law students. So I summer associate at several very large law firms. At that point, I was introduced to land use and real estate a tiny bit. And then I graduated and took a job in San Francisco, and they stuck me in general commercial litigation, which I have no interest in nor any talent in. I had spent about a week in one of the smaller offices that had a land use partner. And she called me and said, do you want to transfer here and be a land use attorney? And I said, I don't know what a land use attorney really does. So she told me, and I hated being in the city and I wanted to not commute anymore. And with this transfer, I could not commute. So I said, fine, sign me up. And that's how I became a land use lawyer. So I'd never taken class, had really no idea at all, but I liked the people and it sounded interesting. And I'm more of my personality is sort of to jump off the cliff and then kind of figure it out as I go. But I've been doing land use ever since.
So that was kind of your turning point. That was when you made the decision and it stuck out to you. Did you have to make any sacrifices to go to land use?
There was certainly a risk moving to a smaller office and jumping into a specialty that I had no idea if I was going to like it or not. That was a bit of a risk. However, it worked out super well because I think it is really helpful to have a niche practice. Otherwise, if you're a general commercial litigator, a general transactional attorney, it's harder to market yourself when there's a lot of people who do the same thing.
You're competing with the big firm.
Yeah. So I was really missing social work, and the office I was working in was pro bono oriented, and there was a flyer. They were seeking volunteer attorneys to help women who were incarcerated related to the death of their abuser. And so I showed up at a training Saturday morning and they passed around a clipboard. They said, you want to take on a case? And I'm like, okay. And I signed up and then went on Monday, and I had a partner who was pro bono oriented and said, I don't know, this sounds interesting. It'll probably be like 3 to 6 months and $5 to $8 grand. And then it was 7.5 years. But that's how we got involved in Debbie's case. I started that when I was a first year lawyer.
Sweet. This seems interesting. I want to help out. I want to do some good.
When you're a social worker, I've really missed that element of doing something that felt meaningful in a different way than doing a more commercially oriented job.
And for those who don't know Debbie's story, do you want to recap it?
There is a documentary that went to Sundance Film Festival and has been seen all over the world. Debbie was a young woman. She met the father of her child who was incredibly abusive to her. After 6.5 years with him, she tried to escape numerous times. Ultimately, after one kidnapping event, she came home and her mother encouraged her to let 2 men who were both gang members in the community basically tried to scare him. Debbie went to this park. These 2 men were there. She left. They killed her abuser, and the DA's office came after her for first-degree murder and were pursuing the death penalty. They extracted a plea, and she was serving 25 years to life for first-degree murder. When we took on her case, there had been a new law that enabled women who were in Debbie's position and never were able to introduce expert testimony in the relevance of the battering to get a new trial to move forward with the habeas petition. That was how we got into Debbie's case. She's one of the most remarkable women I will ever be blessed with knowing in my life. The reason we did the documentary is because we were involved so long in this case and our firm became much larger and we were afraid they were going to dump her case. We thought if we got enough publicity, it would pressure the firm to not abandon her. So that's why the documentary initially was made.
The documentary is really
very powerful.
She's seriously remarkable.
Yeah.
So then after that, you're juggling land use and Debbie's case. What did that look like for you?
It was challenging because we spent a quarter to a third of all billable time for 7.5 years on Debbie's case at a big firm that isn't well received. We had folks who were very protective of the case and shielded us. There was pressure from the firm and we lost a lot because we had no idea what we were doing. But I had a wonderful supervisor. He said, your job is to get her out of prison. By setting that as our goal, we work until she's out and we keep trying new things. From an attorney standpoint, it was the most meaningful legal work that I'll ever get to do. It was challenging towards the end. I wanted to leave my firm, but I knew I could never take her case anywhere else. So I needed to stay until she was out. And as soon as she was out, I was blessed enough to get to move. That was challenging.
Why did you want to leave the firm?
Yeah.
Was it big firm politics?
Big firm, it was during the recession, so there was no work. Big firms are a challenging place to be for most people. My very first mentor at the other firm I worked at, the very first day I met her, she pulled me aside and said, understand this. You are an entirely fucking fungible commodity to this firm. Never give your life to it. I don't fault firms for it, but systemically, that's just how they're built.
Jason said a similar thing about Stanley is like either you know how to do it or they have 40 people to replace you.
I think it's really important for young people to understand the work environment. Some things you can change, many things you can't. You still have agency to make decisions, like staying in some place and being miserable, resentful was not what I was going to do. As soon as I was able to leave, there was a lot of requirements. FaceTime, there wasn't a real respect for parenting. There was definitely a notion of, why do you need to be with your 5-year-old? Like, he's 5. Like, why isn't the nanny handling him? And I'm like, this is not my gig and I'm appreciative, but now it's time for me to move someplace else.
Where did you go from there? Where did you move to?
I went to a law firm in Walnut Creek, much smaller, very well-established real estate firm, and was there for 14 years. That's where I met your dad, and I worked there together for the last portion of that. And they were really wonderful, super good people, very trustworthy sense of folks. They've cared a lot about the culture of the firm. And I was really blessed to be able to work with a lot of talented lawyers and work pretty hard to make that land use group thrive. So I was the co-chair of our land use department for a number of years, and it gave me a lot of opportunity to work closely with clients in a way I would never have had at a larger firm. And so I was really appreciative of the time I got to spend there.
I want to backtrack and go back to, you mentioned your first mentor and your supervisor during the EW case. How did they play into your growth as an attorney?
I've had a number of mentors throughout the years, and they each serve different roles. For Debbie's case, I had a number of more senior attorneys who were certainly much more powerful, even though substantively they weren't experienced, so I couldn't ask them those questions. What I watched them do was really figure out systemically how to protect a matter and how to advocate internally, and who do you align with and work with to help ensure that you can protect your client and work through the inner politics of a larger firm. So I had several of those mentors. I did have one in particular, a substantive mentor who didn't do criminal defense, but he was very focused on pro bono, and he was a phenomenal litigator. And so him taking time to walk us through how you proceed, that was tremendous. When I went to my firm at Miller Starr, the managing partner at that time, was wonderful to me because we did not have much land use work because of the recession, but he took a chance on me and conveyed to me the importance of how do you figure out how to build your client base? How do you develop relationships with clients as well as internally? I did have another land use partner, a woman that I worked for, and she's a phenomenal land use attorney. And she was so busy that she threw us in the opportunity to substantively see really talented, smart people do work, and then you kind of help support them. I'm very experientially driven, and so that to me was phenomenal as opposed to a more formalized mentor setting. Yeah.
There's a thing my dad always says, a Charlie Munger, and Jason mentioned as well, you are the sum of 5 people around you. Do you think being thrown into that environment, how the land use lawyers around you helped out?
We couldn't do it. Our current firm is founded on a team orientation because our work is super complicated. I've been blessed because land use, I still learn something substantively new every week. And that's not an exaggeration because it's so complex. If you like that kind of thing, it's very invigorating, but you have to realize that you need to surround yourself by incredibly smart people and tap into what they are offering and see how you can help add value. So it's been really encouraging for us to have this team orientation. Land use lawyers are very wonky, and we love like sitting and talking and thinking through things that most people like find as exciting as watching paint dry. And so being around other people where you can sort of jump into a topic and then support each other, that is amazing for me.
With the team-oriented aspect, I think that's why you and my dad decided to name it GVR, so it felt like you were part of the whole as opposed to this top-down that you get at the bigger firms.
Your dad came up with that.
Good.
Yeah, he did. We were debating, and most law firms are named after the founding partners, and we just thought that was boring. Yes, we are quite respectful of what developers do, and I think developers often get a very bad rap. They're sort of always the bad guys. And what we see with our clients are very high-quality folks who really help communities thrive, and that doesn't happen without them being willing to take on a ton of economic risk and just slog through this morass of bullshit for years and be attacked on the way. And so our role is to support our clients and stick with them. And so we wanted to recognize the great vision and resilience that our developers have, and that as part of a team together, we can work through this and we'll stand by you. So that was his idea.
I love the name too.
Yeah.
How it works for them. Now, you mentioned the clients. My dad mentioned when you left, what was the firm in Walnut Creek?
Miller Starr.
Miller, yeah. So when you left them, you mentioned you took a lot of your clients with you.
Uh-huh.
Do you think that was a result of, again, having good relationships with all of them?
Yeah, it's critical for lawyers. It used to be that big clients were attracted to a firm, and so the loyalty was to the firm itself. I think many clients now are much more focused and are attracted to the attorney. And so they're significantly more willing to move with the attorney as long as the place that they're going has sufficient infrastructure. I love what I do. It's super fun for me. And it ties back to why I think social work was really helpful for me, even though it seems disconnected. Social work and land use work is person-driven and about relationships and dealing with personalities who are undergoing a tremendous amount of stress and how to help people navigate through challenges within a systemic maze. And so my background was helpful and I found it invigorating to be person-driven. And I think what happens for clients, even though they're heavily resourced, people don't like feeling like they're taken advantage of. At many large firms, there is a model heavily focused on your primary goal is to generate revenue. And we do that by helping our client, but really it's about generating revenue. And that skews how you take care of your client. And attorneys, our job is to advocate for our clients. And so for your dad and me, we wanted to set up a situation where we give extremely high quality advice and guidance, but within a context that our job is to add value to your process, not to just, and I think clients know intuitively who their attorney is. And so I've had a long-standing relationships. Land use is interesting because our projects go on forever. So you build those relationships over time. The other thing helpful for young people as you're thinking about networking is people get focused on clients, like pitching to clients to get work. And one of my strategies, your dad laughs because I don't like chasing people. And I'm like, they're busy. If they need us, they know where to find us. But I don't like taking somebody else's time just to get something from that. So what I have done historically, which has worked really well, is because there's a ton of technical consultants, and then it's more reciprocal, right? Because we start building relationships over time where I know the quality of their work and I know that we get along well and I know how they're going to take care of my client. And so I establish a lot of those long-term relationships. So in our work, when they may come across a client first and they're going to say, you need a lawyer. So, and then I will do the same for them. And again, it's not because we're trying to feed each other work, but it's because we've known each other long enough to know how we're going to benefit and what's a good fit for our respective. So that type of networking, being really creative about who you outreach to, and then also making it be mutually beneficial versus you kind of going and begging and pitching. That's kind of my style.
Yeah. Jason had a similar son. His son is 20 and starting to apply for internships. So pestering people and cold calling and all that is not the way you want to do it. You want to meet people working in the Queens.
Yes.
To build a natural network where you can ask people for other stuff.
When you are a naturally likable person, you're a hard worker, you're honest, people tend to want to, let's talk, let's go out to lunch. People want to work around folks that they like and that they can trust. And like you said, it's the cold calling and pushing where it's all, I always told my boys, when you're outreaching for networking, you have to think about how can you help this person, not just how they can help you. People don't respond when there's not reciprocity.
Jason said when he was getting started out, the biggest thing that helped him was how do you make yourself valuable and how do you make yourself invaluable.
That's smart.
So then moving forward, now you're at GVR. What does it look like for you at GVR?
Young people need to know that things evolve over time, and you don't want to get stuck in this mentality that there's only one particular course you can take to be successful. You have to be willing to kind of work really hard, establish those relationships, have the foundation of diligence and expertise and connections in terms of people and working within an industry that you feel comfortable with. And then understand that places are going to be well suited for you for a particular amount of time. And then they change. With Miller Starr, I was there for a long time. I always felt like they treated me fairly. I think all of them are honorable folks. But structurally, what I learned over time, I became an equity partner. I worked on the comp committee and I was given opportunities to understand how a business works. That was wonderful for me, but it did open my eyes to understand that structurally the system they had in place was incentivizing certain behavior and disincentivizing others in a way that wasn't a good match for me anymore. I'm always a very frank person. I don't bullshit people. I did share my concerns and tried to work through that. But at the end of the day, it was pretty clear that when people benefit from a system, people aren't incentivized. And so I really had to kind of look myself in the mirror, which is scary when you're older and I'm the primary breadwinner. I told my boys, if we do this, they may be eating ramen. I will take care of you, but it could be real dicey. But you kind of have to make a decision that you either, it's like a marriage, you either stay and appreciate what you have, you leave, but staying and complaining is a waste of energy. And so I decided it was time for me to leave. And it was so fun with your dad because we are really different. So we are very complementary. And so being able for me to say, look, I know how much he adds from a legal standpoint. But the other thing that he has, which I don't, is he has a tremendous amount of entrepreneurial experience, which most lawyers do not have. That's why a lot of firms are managed super poorly. And your dad did not look around. He was really skilled in putting our firm together. And it was fun for us because we set a date. Because most people are like, well, as soon as I get everything aligned, then I'll leave. And we're like, don't do that. Do it the opposite. Make the decision to leave, define the date, and then work backwards. And so we knew the date we were leaving, and we worked towards that. You know, the importance, I think, of finding business partners where you are aligned in terms of the way you see things. Doesn't mean you have to be the same, but he and I wanted things to be dialed in. He's very good from an economic standpoint, but we don't nickel and dime anything. We trust each other. We really just encouraged each other and said, let's do this. We gave our notice on Monday, and by Friday at 5 p.m., we were done. And at 5:01, we were launched at GVR. And we had decided, because your dad wanted to know how many clients, you need to assume that I do not have one client, and we're going to rebuild. And if that happens, are you still willing to come forward? But ultimately, people came over and it's been awesome. It's been super successful economically and it's really fun. And when I left my other firm, everybody kept saying, oh, you know, it's not likely to work, but it's okay. You'll have a place when I come back. I'm like, I'm not coming back. So it's going to work one way or the other. And you just have to believe in your own ability to move through things.
I remember all of that stuff from my dad's side as well. We're going to try this and it might be rough for a while, but Nadia and I are going to make it work.
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember that week too on Monday, it was like, I'm quitting. And then by Friday, he was like, yeah, Nadia and I are working on GVR now.
It's been so fun.
Then I think the one thing we've missed through all of this was, were there any points of luck that you felt?
I've been really lucky. It's a matter of perspective. Every day you can wake up. You don't get to choose the circumstances, but you get to choose how you view those circumstances.
So is this,
Ceasefire and I get home. I think my guess is that for most people, they've actually had a ton of luck. It's just whether or not they recognize that that's what's happened. For me, I can't even tell you how lucky I was. And it's primarily related to the people in my life who have helped me. The guidance counselor who got me those last 2 D minuses. My professors at University of Chicago who got me into UCLA. My partners who tried to help me learn how to become a decent social worker and a lawyer. Your dad and I, co-chairs of a search committee for a ski academy. That's how we bonded and learned about each other. Almost every day, the fact that somebody called me and said you were going to be a land use attorney and they happened to be in Walnut Creek. And I'm like, cool, yeah, let's do that. Pretty much every day, I think I'm very lucky. I think most of that luck is being very blessed with having a ton of really amazing people around who help carry you through when you otherwise couldn't.
and then it goes back to the network as well. The more people you have around you can lean on and ask for help, the easier.
I think particularly for your generation, I think luck's really important. The other thing is being willing, which is scary, but to let go of this notion that you need to have 5 AP, 17 different majors, this hyper obsession with having on paper a very curated experience and feeling like unless you are A++ in everything, that you are less than. I think that's a tremendous disservice to you guys. And that's always been my push. We're around a lot of incredibly successful people who have found a lot of success by working very hard in being in a prestige practice, being very focused on having the right internship, the right school, the right grad school, which is amazing, but that's not the only way to get there. I do think that people's psyches and your spirit can become crushed if you're constantly told you're not enough, because your system isn't going to be able to tolerate that forever. I always encourage folks to figure out from a sustainability standpoint how you can find joy every day, exercise and touch the grass and be with people and have fun. That is going to help you thrive. And that transfers into your career path tremendously. When I got my first year summer associate, I found this out later. It apparently was one of the largest firms in the world. I did not know because I'm like, we're just rolling with it. But he was hyper intense. Everything was perfect. And he didn't get the job because he was super arrogant and he was denigrating other people's work. They're like, you're not very nice. You're super wound very tightly, which means that you're not always very resilient in terms of being flexible. Having some faith in yourself that things are going to be fine and not putting so much pressure to know exactly the direction you're supposed to be. And that's my number one advice for all of you overachievers.
That sounds similar to what Jason was saying to his keys of success. He said, you can be lucky, you can be hardworking, you have to be good at what you do.
Yeah.
As long as you have 2 out of 3,
yeah,
you can figure it out.
I think that is very true.
It works well, but you're lucky and hardworking, good at what you do, or just hardworking, good at what you do.
Exactly.
You're set up and you can make it work at something that feels better for you than being stuck in this kind of loop of what people are coming to do to succeed or choose to kind of waste away. But it's on you.
It's on you.
Kind of wrapping it up, what's your favorite sugarable memory?
I'll give you 2 categories of things. When Coleman was younger, on Saturday nights, all of the adults, when he was still racing before freeride, we would hang out in the restaurant and the kids could have the snow bikes on knob and they would go and do that for hours. And a Trueable employee would carry around a backpack with hot chocolate. And we would sit and have champagne and be in this lovely food-in village watching our kids. I love that. That was our original ski tribe and we still talk to them all the time. And then my other group is being at the base of freeride comps and being at the base of the venue and terrifying for all the reasons which you know well, but the community that was always there that held us together, our freeride community being in parking lots and hanging out there, how we hold each other together. Those are probably my favorite.
And the community around freeride's amazing.
Yeah.
Every time someone finishes a run, you never see people sulking. Everyone's excited.
Exactly. High fives and hugs.
Yes.
High fives and hugs.
Thank you, Nadia, for sitting down.
Thank you. I appreciate being around somebody who's focused and impressive and creative. So yay you, Jane.